cropping and living. Is that subtle difference clear? Did anyone will quite understand what I mean by what is meant by intensive cropping as opposed to extensive or expanded cropping? We're talking about people doing like vegetable type production, designated beds as opposed to hodgepodge of plants all over the place. Still no problem. Anybody have a problem with this core allocation? Okay. Okay. All right, we have a few more to go. So now, if the project that you're looking at is open range livestock, there's a consideration that I wanted to look at. Without total land usage, it would be difficult to conceptualize it as being a kind of smart project. So this is how you try to put a limit on the industrialized type agriculture that we were talking about yesterday, where people are cutting down, hundreds of acres of forest lands. Last year, plants and grasses, right? For the feeding. So that this won't capture that. But if you're talking about livestock management strategies that are particularly critical for climate smart agriculture, improve pastures and grassland management, including rotational grazing, regenerative vegetative growth, restoration of degraded land. Remember this tool was developed long before CIS11 and the developments to do with LDN were a feature of the operation of this project. So appropriate land management also contributes to mitigation through carbon sequestration, which is the feature of the soil care project, and in terms of deep-rooted vegetation and growth in the soil. And that type of project, what we need to it's intensive livestock crop production, including things like zero grazing and protected agriculture. If less than 10% of the land space is used for productive purposes, then you're already getting 1.5. That's basically the doing anything significant. If 11 to 30% of the land space is used for productive purposes, that's considered fair, we get 2 points for that. If up to 50% of the land space is used for productive purposes, that's considered average. Remember, we're talking about a resource that you want to conserve. You don't want people to have an intensive agricultural project. Let's say put a long greenhouse, which is only a couple thousand square feet to be cleared for the whole 7 acres. Right? So that's the kind of context in which this would be seen as a very appropriate use of the land. If 51 to 80% of the land space is used for productive purposes, that's considered good. Okay. More than 81% of the land space is used for productive purposes, that's considered excellent. That's where you're going to 5. It's going to 5. Anybody have any serious concerns with that we didn't speak thus far? Okay, so that's 1.1 land in terms of the first of the 4 subcategories within resource conservation. Second one is water. Now, remember all of this was written and developed 2016, and I've only modified bits and pieces of it over the years, coming up to this 2.1 version of the C-SAC 2. But you can see there, you can read there, I'm not going to read for you, right? But water is an important resource when you're talking about resource conservation, especially in the era of climate change. How do we If it's a cropping project, then the mean of irrigation will be the main determinant of how you use water. Anybody has any serious disagreement with that? That if you're talking about cropping projects, that talking about water use, then the mean of irrigation will probably be a good way to quantify how well the resource is used. Now, if you're pumping water from a source, there's a river or whatever, to irrigation furrows, this is not a irrigation for water management lecture. So if I say anything or see something there that you're not totally familiar with, you don't know what irrigation furrow is, please stop me. You only get 1 pointer. But that's seen as the least, absolutely least efficient way of using the water resource. If you're pumping from a source and then you're using overhead sprinklers, you get 2 clubs. And I think we had that mini discussion yesterday, right? And we were talking about if it's solely rain fed, with no harvesting, no water harvesting, or no storage, you get 3 points for that. That's considered average performance. If there's on-site water harvesting and storage, and you're using emitters, or without getting into specifics of agriculture or whatever type, once you're not using sprinklers, then you can apply 4 points for that. But if you're doing both on-site water harvesting, you're storing water, using emitters, or having a low volume irrigation system, and on top of that, you're using improved cultivars, and that's when you qualify for the 45. Is there anyone who doesn't get the significance for that? Because most times I hear people talking about water management, which is what you should be talking about, right? As far as I'm concerned, there's no such thing as an irrigation project. If you saw something listed as an irrigation project, that tells me that people didn't really think what they're talking about. But the irrigation project would imply that you're just going to be letting go water, right? Project is about irrigation. This is madness. It's a water management project in which you're concerned with how you're going to apply water to your plant. But you must be thinking about the drainage as well, right? Because if you just have an irrigation project, in other words, as we say, popular plant, you're just letting go water on the plant. And you're not concerned about what's happening with your vegetable concerns, what happens in the lower levels of that farm area, right? Especially if you're in a high nature value landscape. Anyone? Sure, please disagree. Okay. But it will definitely be for intensive couple projects and not openly like projects, right? So yeah, I agree with you. Okay, so in a particular region, in region 5, region 1. But then they are basically sprinkling. So they basically sprinkling. So they are obtaining water from source. So this I didn't say. I didn't always say that the source was a open river or something. It could be public. Yeah. You have to equate it with overhead sprinklers. Unless if you go into the field and they have 8 or 9 big barrels, even though it's water from the, I'm just saying, I'm just explaining how it should move up a stream. Oh. You understand? If they were practicing storage, even though it was stored water from the public need, I think they still get some credit for that. But it shows that they're looking to conserve the resource. If you have we already agreed that we're not going to have any two. They're going to get one. They're going to get one. Yeah, they'll get one first, right? But why I'm saying I would move from 1 to 2 is that they're not using irrigation furrows. If they were taking the water from the water can and then just pour it along the drain, which is what the irrigation covered which is that, then that's what they qualify for. But if they're using it as a sprinkler, because of water is kind of a sprinkler, right? So they're taking water from the main, sprinkling it on their plants, so that providing a sprinkler system. So they're taking water from source. That's what happens with source is the government, right? And they're sprinkling it on. They get you for that. If you're enterprising enough to run a hose, let's say, to 6 miles in the field, then I would say that they're operating at a slightly higher level, right? So they're not only pumping water from the source and where sprinklers, but they are storing here, right? On site. On site water harvesting, storage, use of emitters. If the water wasn't just coming from the main and it was storing and then it get more. But what it does is strategy too, in mind. And yeah, that type of thing. So we have to put it along.
Question.
So,
Just elaborate on what she said. The watering can, and you must keep it sprinklers. It would be a sprinkler, but it'd be more efficient than the overhead sprinkler, because you'll not be wasting the water. You are irrigating directly in the system that is necessary for both.
no, I don't want to, I want to disagree. I mean, I can't think of how many people take a watering can and take the time and yeah, you got a watering can. I mean, if you're operating at that level, you have a watering can, you walk it, right? You walk it and you walk it and then watch it. I don't think people are going to I don't want to be that way. Well, no, I get it. From my experience, I mean, your experience might be different. I see that as just the same effect as a over expensive.
For larger.
Yeah, but for that, you're holding them.
For watering can you will not use a large holding water.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying. This was a very specific case you explained, right? You see that very, very small, and they're using water can, almost a backyard type of thing, right? Because they're using water from the main. They're using water from the main. Instead of as we did. Okay, so then where will you put them? I'm saying you can give them 2 points for that. Are you suggesting we should give them 3?
I'm not saying two, but I'm not putting a category just for it.
Oh, okay.
I would.
I agree. I mean, remember,
You just have
your
to use.
your tool is you have to use you have to use it. You have to use your judgment as somebody who is. And just remember it's 20 questions there. So even if you're off by 1 or 2 here, it is not going to right. It ought not, unless you make that mistake consistently and get everybody, right? It ought not to affect the overall total because what we are arguing is between 1 and 2, right? Even if we give everybody the benefit of the doubt and give them a fair rating, they only end up with 40 points. And then we'll be able to see categorically, that, this is not very advanced, but I thought that's what that cooperation. Everybody understand?
Yeah.
Logic behind that? Yeah. Howard, so.
Yeah. My question is, if the farmer is getting water from source, either from the river pumping, or they're getting it from the house, and they are also combining the rainwater harvesting, where do you classify that work?
I would go as far as because there's some storage, and especially if they were not then using that stored water that they also, difficult to obtain in the first place, and then taking a water in Canada, win-win. If that was connected to a simple gravity field system, I'll give them a bonus. Everybody understand?
It's subjective based on the officer that is conducting the test.
Well, everything is going to be subjective. Now, but let me just say, because we have a means of categorizing, right? It makes it less subjective because we have already put in keywords there like storage. So if the storage wasn't part of it, then we can legitimately see that we can't give it 4 points because It doesn't involve any storage. Right? Now remember, we cannot, as a field officer, you cannot predetermine what you mean by storage. So exactly. Suppose the person has 5 acres, I only have one little blue barrel. You still want to get that point because it's about intent, it's about understanding, it's about focus, it's about and then remember an approach. Remember, what I said is an approach, as you mentioned yesterday. It is not just a hodgepodge of practices. So that person, to me, gets the benefit of the job because they are buying into the approach. And the approach says that you must try to save, try to conserve, try to harvest, try to store. Yeah? And that can be it, right? So I'll give them the benefit of the doubt in that sense and make it less subjective by saying that at least this is somebody who's thinking about conserving the water. Two, one little barrel might not be enough to, to store water for 5 acres. But at least that person has intent. It shows that if that person wants to be exposed to a GCF grant that distributed water tank, I'd be more prone to give that person. So the other users out there who are unconcerned about storing, even though they're using main water from the main, and they just forget, that's still only going to the Do you understand? Remember I told you that there's 2 years about climate change, climate finance, and we haven't spoken about climate justice end of there, but during the course of the discussion, can the field is an ending. And all of them are I, I don't think I want to get that granular, into that specific. Remember, it's a tool meant to categorize, trying to fit people into, literally fit their operation at the time into little boxes. Now remember, this is a self-assessment tool as well. Farmers have used this, right? Realize, okay, right now I'm operating at level 2. There are a number of practices that if I change them, like if I get more storage, let's say, I could give myself an extra 2.0, or extra 2.0. Remember, if I take my 10 minutes, there are 20 possible areas of improvement, right? We can't get too granular, so just one aspect, with the water. But I take your point, right? With experience, with using the tool, if it's going to be used for auditing purposes, let's make careful. If it's going to be used for auditing purposes, then it means one has to be a little more granular in terms of how you're assessing the farm, because it might have links to a smart contract or in terms of comparing 2 competing projects for financing. You want to give the project that is more climate smart the additional funding for full access to the funding, as opposed to some joker, and this has happened happens all the time, to some joker who just says he's doing water harvesting, so think that they're entitled because they're going to find. You know what I mean? That's the benefit of the tool. The tool is meant to separate, literally separate those small, separately group from machine. Very fun. Yeah. But so far we haven't even gotten to this. We improve cultivar yet, but I'm taking a point. That is the fact, right? Use a mulch as opposed to living ground cover. So, but if you guys see the intent there, I put my head on a block and say that the person doing this and thinking about no mulch and no block. Yeah? So that is not going to affect people at this end of the scale for this particular activity. So, yeah, right. So, um, line insurance, get the line insurance.
So
Mhm.
they just collect the water duty and you for it and then they use it for it. Right.
Yeah, I'm interested in that, but I'm more interested in when you go to the farm, what is the dry season, what are they actually doing? You see? Because remember you going out there doing an assessment, or the farmer is doing an assessment of his or her own farm. That is what happens in the dry season, you know. So what are they doing now? So now that it's not the dry season, everything will be rainfed. Yeah? So then that is where this category comes. So it's solely rainfed, but they have storage as opposed to here. So they get 4 points instead of 3 points. Because if it was solely rainfed with no harvesting and no storage, yeah, here we go. So that is how easy, how effortless it will be to separate those two things. That would be an easier case. Yeah. Somebody, oh, sorry. Somebody, oh, sorry. Ah, all right. Would that be considered a closed cropping system, pumping of water from source irrigation furrows? I think you'll get one. You'll get one. Because that's part of the difficulty as Mr. Frederick mentioned yesterday. When you're into um swamp right or he's going to swamp right production, you know, water. Just the drainage alone, I mean, there is right? So it will hardly qualify as a climate smart project in and of itself with respect to water use. This is very, very, very good. So how come nobody took me up with this improved cultivar thing? How many farmers do you know actually adjust the cultivar based on the amount of water they have available? It's been done all the time. There are people who tell you that, you know, there are particular varieties, particular cultivars that they grow in dry season because you know these plants require that. I think you want to reward that. So the water harvesting, the storing, the use of the metals, but they're also concerned that, you know, if they use the right cultivar, they'll use less water. Yeah? But water quality as well. Yeah. But water quality, I'm not too sure how I pick this up here. So the not familiar country. One of the major water hazards, right? But you have potable water use, water for agriculture use as well, right? And there are times when literally people have a holes into the what was done, pulling water out, right? And that's the major source, a main source for potable water. There's always this conflict between, you know, agriculture and potable water use. Main and key. Freshwater land that is true, then you are actually going to kill people. I forget about the potable water is heavy. I'm not even going to drink something when they treat it, right? But the farmers are going to put themselves in the real trouble. So, Lenora, I understand what you're talking about the water quality issue, but this tool is only going to pick up the conservation part of it, right? The quality concern will come lower down when we talk about biodiversity impact. Everybody pick up with that? So that when we reach to that, to the fourth category, you see if we bring that up again and see if we can sort it out there. Yeah? Any other questions before we move on? But I really like this. This is my own personal background. Because I think we don't give people credit enough credit for using the right cultivar.
So then if you have a combine of one and the customer, how will you use it?
If you're pumping water from source and into irrigation, probably I don't care what cultivar you want. No, I mean, you know, gotta be realistic. That tell me that resource conservation wasn't in the back of your mind when you were planning your thing. And I'm not casting aspersions. I'm not saying that that makes the person a bad farmer. I'm just saying that with this system, they won't get extra points. And it's like doing your job in the service. If you do your job, they don't get extra credit for that. They pay you for that. You're supposed to do that, right? So you don't get extra credit. They won't get extra credit for having the right cultivar if you're still using the open farm. Yeah? So yeah. You think about water because you whether you get that water illegally or otherwise. Because what is what is most embarrassing moments I've had in my life, and I've had plenty of actually, was in Belize once. I think to a group of farmers in Belize, in a bunch of guys who are farmers. That is illegal to drill wells in most Caribbean islands. Right? In Trinidad, all the water belongs to the water authority. You cannot drill a well in Trinidad and see if the maybe you can application. All that water belongs to the water and sewage authority for water. And this guy got up and said, so wait, this is that the government owns all the water. And then it's coming, but so they only test it. But they just could not understand the concept of a government saying that they own all the water, because in most jurisdictions, as far as people are saying jamming for a life farm, you can't tell me what to do with jamming. The legislation tells you so. All right. Now, when it comes to open range livestock, if you have direct access to a pond or stream swimming, you only get 1 point. Because you haven't really done much. Exploiting the beach, right? The beach of somewhere in externalities and all your livestock are just taking on what you already get extra points. If you have troughs and containers, okay, so that tells me that you're thinking about resource conservation. Everybody still with me? Yeah. If you have no spill troughs, it's even more significant. Because that tells me that you're not just putting out water there for your animals, they can do whatever they want. But you take the time to design proper troughs that even though the animals are using it, they're not spilling. Everybody's spilling. You don't have your livestock exposed that's one feature. If you have on-site water harvesting and no spill troughs, they get even water. And if you have on-site water harvesting, no spill troughs, and then you provide shade. I mean, I know that a lot of you aren't necessarily livestock production and stuff, but anybody with this sort of livestock production, especially no condition, if you provide shade, it will reduce the heat stress, reduce the water demand, etc. Is your involved those simple questions? If it's open range livestock, and the farmer hasn't provided for, he hasn't provided no structure, there are no shade, just as within regular animals, because what they come. Yeah. But this tells you that there's a certain level of concern about conserving the resource. Everybody's still looking. Now, when it's intensive livestock and intensive crop production, if you're using potable water from a public supply, now this is different to what you were talking about. Here, I'm more concerned about the people in protected agriculture, people with the so-called greenhouses, which is not misnomer, right? I don't like people talking about greenhouses in the country. There are very few greenhouses. There are some shade houses, and they are protected structures, and they are row covers, and Timothy is the exposure on that. But when people go about telling you that they have a greenhouse, I'm coming to see a completely enclosed, environmentally controlled area. That's why boxing have there. You only go to dry cleaning, right? No, I mean very seriously. Because again, remember, I'm not just saying this because I like to do. In 2012, CARICOM Secretariat and the IRTA organization from Spain hosted a training program in the region on the use of protected agricultural structures as a climate change adaptation measure. And they were right enough, but they invite me as one implementer under the area of adoption of technology. Right? And that was the major thing coming out of Jamaica. If you have protected agricultural structures enclosed under 500 meters, that's impossible. Right? You can't go in there at 9 o'clock in the evening. You can't go in there at 9 o'clock in the evening. And you certainly can't go in there at 2 o'clock in the afternoon. Right? And the same way you set it, the plant set. Right? The same way you use it. I just want to make that point. That your intensive agriculture and a small plot is different than what I'm talking about. Right? Like if I'm from a water course or a well, you get too much points for that. At least like that. If you're pumping from a water course or a well, and you're using renewable energy, you're going to get some points there. Yeah. Because although we have a specific section on energy use, the timely resource conservation by the fact that we're using more climate friendly, more eco-friendly, extractively water and energy. And this is important when it comes to compare projects with funding, especially protected structures. Right. If you have water harvesting and storage, because a lot of these covered structures have large surface area. Right? And there's nothing stopping you from wasting water off of those large coverage. And whatever you do, but unless it's in the plastic, so it doesn't have water on the looks. Very sturdy. And you get the most points, you get the full mark. If you're doing water harvesting, you're doing storage, and you're using some sort of recycling or circulating service or recycling process. Yeah. Before I take a break, anybody who is not expert on times like that can have any concern. If you're not using, no, because the idea behind it, remember the water concern about water. I feel recirculated and tells me that you're concerned about conserving water. The people, and these are the kind of questions we need to ask you because when you're out there in the field with your phone and you're doing this thing on the fly and you're answering these questions on the fly, you want to be some sort of frame of reference. So that even if you have to you were discussing with the farmer, you have to explain to him why you did not follow your instructions. You have to, in your own mind, as somebody who is 55 and you should be able to rationalize. Be intensive, like stuff. So the third resource that we're looking at, when we look at water resource, we look at land circulatory water, we look at nutrient flow, and then we have a fourth one in there called leaf. And I'm sure none of you have ever discussed when you talk about transfer. So we come to what is the source of the nutrients used or listed to be used in this project? While the essential elements and other plant nutrients are known, there are many ways for farmers to make them available to plants and trees. Livestock feeds must also contain the requisite nutrients. Climate smart agriculture places a premium on the source of those nutrients and the efficiency with which they are used. Does anyone have any philosophical difficulty with that concept? Okay. So then if we agree with that, then this is how we will score the cropping budget. If it's inorganic fertilizers produced using petrochemicals, just like in HNPI, right? You don't do anything special there. They're one. Yeah. Now, everything is hard. Any question? If you're using organic fertilizers sourced off farm and some petrochemical use, you know why I specifically put source on off farm? Because again, personal bias on my part. I don't believe these organic. These people who say they're going organic and have no idea about it. I get very worried. Right? But I'm also concerned about the people who are saying, okay, we're going organic, but are chucking in manure from Beaufort. You know, I chucking in manure from Beaufort. You know, and what are those animals eating? How much of a carbon footprint does that organic material have? Is it? Right, so all so grows with American organic farming is that they prepare to truck, literally truck manure from one state to another, just to be able to say that they're not using agrochemicals, right? But the carbon footprint and other organic stuff, better they just go down the road and buy 2 bags of filters and because we know the energy expended in making that is less than what all those trucks, pull out in terms of getting the organic. Again, are you seeing where the climate change and the climate finance are linked? Because what you do not want to do, which is what, when I sat down and thought about it, what I do not want to promote is these kinds of arbitrary projects being funded instead of the people who genuinely deserve to get a type of funding. The farmers who are really, really trying to be climate smart in their operation. But because this larger farmer raises a flag and says, no, I only use organic material, then that is not supposed to be enough to equate, equate the activity. Then we will come to more detailed discussions later. So if you have use of organic fertilizer source of farm and some petrochemical use, okay, I get to that. If you use naturally occurring soil minerals, green manures, remember you were talking about that before? But now we're looking at it as the nutrients as opposed to the land itself, right? Oh, by the way, although we are asking 20 questions, some of them have overlap. Either something we may have missed in land, you pick it up in biodiversity, something and biodiversity report. Something we have missed in safety, and I pick it up in greenhouse gas reduction. Look at on farm composting, and when you see me say compost, you know I'm talking about something completely different to the fiber which you have in the thing. And you ameliorate with green manure, get up the color code. For that, if you have on-farm composting and soil amelioration, go for it. You're already operating in a good way. And when you talk about excellence, you have on-farm composting, cooperative and vermiculture, use of green manures, aquaponics. This goes on and on. But as the person doing the auditing, you will know the intention behind this or you can The podium is blocking. Sorry. Yeah. So if you're using green manure and I'm truly vermiculture there, but you know vermiculture as much as it is and as much as it is important for climate smart agriculture, one has to be concerned about vermiculture and the Victorian species. Yeah. Are we gonna pick that up? Instead of saying that only 20 questions we are asking, we're gonna have more than one bite of the cherry. Because when we go down to talk about biodiversity support, we have to be concerned about are we importing anything that is escapes into the wild, have negative consequences. Yeah. So even when we're talking about aquaponics, if you're talking about importing some arbitrary strain of coil or that can get into your waterways and suppress the normal, not only the normal, the indigenous population. You don't want to be part of a climate smart agriculture project that introduces that. You admit? You admit? But you don't have some experience with that.
Just how it's out there. So before I think about how we're going to be 52 with 50, I think it's 26,000 languages. I would say we bring things in and we don't really think of it like we're doing business.
Definitely. And but online, for the benefit of our online audience, we had a long, I don't know, rather, to the exchange of that to us as significant agricultural officers, bringing stuff and making fun plan points from this extension. That was unresolved. So when you talk about capital projects, that would be it. When we talking about open range livestock now, and I recognize that not everybody in the room is a livestock expert, but I mean, these are some things that I hope you grasp as well. So if you have heavy dependence on imported, manufactured, concentrate feed, we are the lower end of the scale, right? To get one for them. If you have some grass, vegetation, use of concentrate feeds. So in other words, you're not just totally dependent on concentrate, right? You have a fairly decent. Okay, you get 2 points there. If you're using indigenous grasses, vegetation, and mineral lakes, I know there was recently a project in distribution of mineral lakes. Those of you who are not into livestock production, mineral lakes is a way of augmenting the diet of the animals by giving them access to minerals to lake. It's a big block. I think looking like concrete in the field, and the animals get to lick. Yeah. Yeah. You guys, yeah. And then one was after, yeah. Like most soils, I think. Yeah, but that's very important. But if you have improved grasses, mineral lake, nutrient recycling in the field, what do you mean nutrient recycling in the field? Compost, right? Kind of thing like that. Because remember you're talking about open range livestock. Wherever they put down a cow path, the cow path. I think the fancy English term for cow dropping the cow path. It's like a pancake. Yeah. If you're brave enough and dry enough to get up and walk with it, right? The cow path is a way of recycling nutrients on the like having a walking manual applicator, right? Everybody cow path. Put a line there. So if you want the full 5 marks, then you're talking about improved grasses, nutrient recycling in the field, and silage. Many of you know what silage is. That's when you dry the grass and you improve the palatability and the nutritional content by ensiling it. In other words, you put in your soaking it in molasses or stuff like that. Okay?
nothing.
I mean, feeding them fruit and vegetables.
Yeah, right.
In terms of nutrient quality, I get very worried when people tell me about poultry. Because although it's free range, poultry as a industry is so dependent on quality, right? I am not sure if a lot of these free range layers don't get so they're free range, on the eating and couples and whatever. But don't they come to feed? Don't they feed them? Don't they feed them? Yeah, they feed them. They tend to feed them in store, but what we call that store, but either finish or layer. So I tend not to get too worried about that. When I talk about open range livestock, because in this part of the world we tend not to have that, as a major feature. Um, Open range poultry is more backyard, as opposed to genuine open range poultry for egg laying. So if you have open range poultry, working all over the game, they're going to come back into some of the factory system and you're going to feed them there. Right? So, all them, if I open range in terms of the exercise, that's open range in terms of yeah, give it
For example, we have some farmers like do cut grass, like for the farm, and they sometimes they mix it seed on the tree. And also molasses on the tree. Also they use molasses to the factory.
yeah, they use it right. I just they use it as a binder. Yeah.
Use the grass and the pasture that we have on the field.
I would go as far as because they're doing it now, next I go as far as yeah. Yeah, I go as far as yeah. Yeah, I go as far as but if you show that they use improved grasses as well, because no one is suggesting that you have an operation without the use of concentrate. Right? If you have a proper milking operation, there are times when you're going to need to augment the grass nutrition for your dairy. Yeah. So smart agriculture is that in other words, not to get a ban on chemical, right? What we're talking about is the degree of compliance. Remember, that's even true. It's how close do you comply to what an ideal time and smart operation is. So an ideal time and smart operation would be 100 points. If somebody is doing every single thing to the level of excellence like this, and what all 20 questions are going to perfect score that, then that would be a perfect pentagon as we will discuss later. Everybody still with me? After this, anything? Yeah, I do want well, let's talk about mineral licks and I didn't see why we should make it. All right. Are we good so far? All right. So we just finished. Okay. Now, when it's intensive livestock or crop production, such things as zero grazing, protected agriculture, and animals, which is zero grazing. Same touching on what you're talking about. If you have heavy dependence on imported, manufactured concentrate feeds and inorganic fertilizers, this is why you see feed and fertilizer in the same category. For example, some of these intelligent systems are both livestock and crop components. Everybody still with me? The first one is zero grazing might have cover structure doing something else. But as it's listed in the manual, but just for completeness, there are times when you're going to be going to a farm where there are two simultaneous operations. What you do in a case like that is you grade the cropping aspect and you grade the livestock aspect. within the same subcategory, and then you use the arithmetic mean. In other words, if they got 2 for the crops and 5 for the livestock, add the 5 and 2, you get 7 divided by 2, right? And just use the mean, the largest whole number. So if it comes up to 3.5, they carry it over to the 4. So the whole project gets a 4 for that subcategory. Am I making sense? Right? I'm not just telling you this stuff, it's all in the manual. So when you get more comfortable, and when we meet you tomorrow, hopefully you'll be able to use off your phone so that we those of us who will be able to have data. All right. So if it's some grass, use of organic fertilizers that are sourced off the farm, some special chemical use, notice that comes up again. And I was thinking about organic fertilizer sourced off farming, because that has a heavy carbon footprint. I don't think we should be 3 points to organic material sourced on the farm. That doesn't have that carbon footprint. Make sense? Anybody, apart from the few people who are forgetting what I said. For the benefit of online audience, I mentioned yesterday that solar secondary school for Cambodia. I know it, I'm not in Henry. I'm not in Henry, not yes. It is strictly of the great soon. I was getting 1 or 2 of that. They have since straightened out. They're now trying to look a week. All right. So if you had improved grasses, mineralics, nutrient recycling in the field, on-farm composting, soil amelioration, what we deal with 2, then you get 4. And then the excellent performance would be if you improve grasses, nutrient recycling in the field, and styling, mineralics, on-farm composting, vermiculture. In other words, if we just amalgamated the best practices in 2 previous categories, come up with it. Everybody still in it? Please don't see you need to try to make me not look too bad if I ask any type of thing. Ask me husband. So this is the 4th one. Remember, we just in the first category, resource conservation. Not doing too badly, right? We just ran through 4 of these subcategories. So the 4th one. That's why this is 1.4. So the question is, describe the tools, equipment, and machinery to be used by farm labor. How many of you have been to kind of small agriculture session when you didn't have labor too much? Put my hand on a block. The answer is absolutely no. Because when you're talking about a comprehensive kind of small agriculture, you can't not mention it. So consideration about energy efficiency in kind of small agriculture is often focused on machinery and input manufacturing, but less about the joules expended. The joules is a measure of energy, right? The joules expended by farmers and workers. You see why this is a comprehensive kind of smart agriculture comparison. So we're trying to look at full complement of activities that makes it a kind of smart agriculture approach. But often get into that, we'll talk about approach, the conventional approach, and a series of practices. Kind of smart agriculture is an approach. And for it to be an approach with its name, then there must be this broad, comprehensive understanding of all things that make up the approach, as opposed to concentrating on just one activity. So 9 times out of 10, when you hear about climate smart agriculture, you're hearing about just one practice. Either somebody talking about composting, somebody talking about water harvesting, somebody talking about buying solar panels to electrify the operations or something like that. Never, and I can say this without fear of contradiction, it's never about a comprehensive approach to all the issues involved in climate smart. That is what the strength of it is to do, right? So for cropping projects, are the hand tools in for repair? Do you have four crop layout? I mean, I'm not trying to put you on this spot, but tell me, how many of you have had occasion to discuss plot layout when you're talking about climate smart? Hmm? You see, you do this somewhere in your family. Right. Because plot layout is a major determinant of how efficient the labor is going to be. Yeah? What about maintenance of hand tools? I'm talking about everything from cutlass to hose to spades and shovels. Were you were part of the discussion last time around between spades and shovels? Well, organic to a speed and one kind. You're part of that discussion. Because I think in Guyana, you guys have difficulty with us trees and intention in terms of what you call a speed and what you call a shovel. It's very uncomfortable, but we won't get into that. We won't get into that right now. So yeah, so if the trees are not pruned, why does that affect labor? If the trees are pruned properly and things like operations and things like that, what difficult? It's going to be more difficult if the trees are pruned properly. Oh, it is not. Yeah, of course, yeah.
Because you use more chemicals, you use more fertilizer, take more cost.
And you'll use more chemicals. Remember, this is not a nutrient category, or this is not again, but this is under the labor category. So you're telling me that you could be using your farm labor or your own labor more efficiently if you took cognizance of these kinds of things. So when you're designing a climate smart agriculture project, and you don't have that kind of thing factored in, people like me think you don't want it to happen. Because we think that you are only concentrating on this, but to have it there, this compost there, this, we want to buy two set of inverters and 10 set of batteries, and then we go and plan a farm that is inconsistent with the farming. Yeah. I mean, I hope I'm not coming down too heavy here. But as I said, this thing took us a while to come up with, or to be comprehensive. That's why I'm comfortable, exposing you to the inner workings and to the inner workings of the art. Because I want you to have to improve it. Now, if you're talking about mechanized tools and for repair, for flat layouts, the tree is not pruned. You only get 2 points for that. Because we're talking about climate smart agriculture, we're talking about use of mechanized tools as well. Because without advertising any further, you all know my favorite farmer. He has his power tools called solar power. He has his battery charging, come on, the whacker or whatever he's using. Totally upgrade. Very fantastic farmer. Anytime you get a chance to do this, please check it out. So if you have well-maintained hand and mechanized tools, then you get 3 points for that. So that shows me that you're concerned about people working on the farm. You're concerned about yourself as well. Because we all know that it takes more energy to chop. That does cut that. To chop. But I chop at them. Yeah. So it can be that you're concerned about the efficiency by making sure the tools are sharp. Yeah. But you don't find yourself using your cutlass like a wheelbarrow. The cutlass only plan after the use so right, yeah. Yeah. The cutlass not operating itself. Now, appropriate plot layout, to get 4 points, if you have appropriate plot layout, well-maintained land, mechanized tools, everything well-maintained, you have to 4. Want to get an excellent grade there, then if you have ergonomically adjusting tools. That is as simple as having the right, I mean, I don't want to show my age, you know. That's like having the right length for brushing cutlass. How many of you have seen, you know, with the, what we call a brushing cutlass sometimes, you know, when cutlass when you cannot. It's this side, and you see that moving on your, as opposed to, yeah, as opposed to having a company adjust to one. I'm talking about how you adjust your backpack, the whole range of things, right? Whatever we on labor now, and in terms of capital smart items, one of the resources that we want to consider, we want to make sure that energy expended in the operations are, you know, efficiently. So that if you have all this going for you, you get 5 points. We're gonna mechanically adjusted tools, body machinery and stuff, well maintained, good plot layout. Yeah, that would be up to 5.